want to sort of ground the conversation in the essence of the work that you do. So, what does a product designer do at a company? What would you say is the core function? Because product design is a discipline we teach, and you're not an instructor, you're our actual designer. So I'm curious because a lot of potential students, I should say, have a misconception of what product design really is. So could you ground us in what a product designer is and what they do for a company?
Yeah, definitely. I've had a blog post kicking around in my head on this for a while, titled something like "What even is product design?"
Yeah.
Because it's super nebulous. You're right. So I'll say what product designers do, and it will reflect a lot of what I have done since I started at this company. And then I'll talk a little bit of real briefly about what I think product designers really like, how I would define that work, what I'd like to see it become here on our team for our company. So essentially, product design, when we talk about it here, we're talking about often digital product design. And we're usually honestly talking about application design is a large part of what we mean when here we say product design. For Flatiron School, it's a little different because, well, really a simple definition of product design is designing the stuff we sell, the product,
Right.
what we produce, what people pay us money for. And so for us, that's our education. So product for us is actually two main things. It's curriculum development and a little bit of delivery in there as well. And so that's one sort of aspect of product design that at this point I have really no involvement with. The other side of this is the engineering and design of the products that we create for our students and our instructors. Guide, base, Docutron, which has that name because I literally just made a funny logo and stuck it on the thing, and now that's the name of the app, which I just love and think is hilarious. That's how this stuff happens sometimes. That's like just student document management app. So essentially the kinds of things that product designers work on in the digital realm, when we're talking about most of our products being delivered through a screen, is maybe the easiest way to think about it. Is there's a continuum. So when you think of product design, there's all the research that goes into it. The sort of high level product strategy. What does the business need? What do customers need out there that what are they reaching for other things for that we could be doing for them in education? And then there's the kind of we'd call it UX design or user experience design. And that's so we have conviction around what to sell. How do they experience that? What is it? What's it like to them? How do they get in? How do they hear about it? That's user experience design. Once they're here, once they land on our website, for example, or into one of our apps, is it recognizable to them? Do they understand what it's for at a glance? Can they get a sense of what they should do there or use it for, or how it might be valuable to them? So that's kind of user experience design. How do I find my way around this thing, navigate? How does it affect my daily life? It's really all encompassing like that. And so there's a ton of empathy that goes into that work. There's a ton of watching people click around your stuff and not be able to find the giant glowing button that you put right in the center. And you're like, no, but you can't say no. You got to watch them fail so that you get to understand why didn't they see that thing. And It's amazing what people don't notice that seem inherently obvious to the designer. Then we've got UI design. So if UX is understanding how I flow through it and designing kind of the path from this to this to this and back again, UI design is everything you see. So it is the buttons, it's the colors, it's the form elements, it is the layout of the screen. Encompasses things like interaction design, which get even more nuanced. What happens when I click on those buttons? Are we accounting for accessibility states on those things, for just not just hover and focus, but selected and that type of interaction, so that if I'm someone who's tabbing through an interface, not only is it can I see what I'm on, but do I get a sense of like, oh yeah, if I tab this, it goes through the navigation, and then this tabs me down the screen, and just organizing the user interface to provide a good user experience to enhance the overall product. So that's kind of how they, it's like a Russian doll, so it's got these sort of different components.
Right.
The really neat thing is that at least on our team, we're moving to a sort of cross-discipline. Can I talk today? On the day that I'm doing a podcast, we're working on basically like where I'm going is we have so currently our product design or our design team is like 5 people. So we have 2 product designers. One of them is a very senior staff designer. He's designed almost all of our design system in its entirety. And then we have another product designer who's fairly junior, and he really kind of helps on that UX portion during like a project cycle when we're building features, and he kind of helps think through UI solutions that might make sense when we're trying to like shape more of the strategy portion of a project. Whereas Drew is doing not only a lot of incredibly deep, like detailed work in Figma, he's actually maybe one of our more senior front-end engineers as well. And so he's helped kind of establish our React component library, and he's worked really closely with our engineering team to kind of decide where does documentation make sense, where should our designers code, and where is it more for our engineers. But the reason he's able to do like that very senior work is because he's not just conversant in engineering, not just conversant in like the business side. He has deep hands-on experience in all of that.
Right.
So that's essentially what I would like to see is all of our designers have broad capability. So we don't just have marketing designers who make the graphics for the website, and we don't just have product designers who make the stuff, the UI for our apps. We have designers who are able to play in any of those roles, but people maybe have like a center of gravity. So we have 2 really great marketing designers, graphic designers, who right now are actually working. One of them is working on a redesign of our blog page. And so that's not a thing that she has typically worked on before, but she's done so much with our website. She has such a deep understanding of why things convert, why they don't. She was able to like school me on how our emails have performed in the past and suggested some template upgrades and that kind of thing. And so, it's the kind of role. Product design is one of those roles that's like super different depending on the team that you land on. Oftentimes, a lot of teams you'll find, and I've worked at places like this where it's very siloed.
Yeah.
And so you'll have that really high degree of specialization. You get that a lot in larger companies as well, right? Where you have like many, many design teams and that type of thing. I think when we have a smaller team like ours and we're trying to accomplish some high leverage things, it's just so much more fun.
Yeah.
I think to have like broad agency and capability across everybody.
Yeah. So how important is it for a designer, I guess depending on the product that they're working on, but for a designer, let's say working on, in this case, like let's say an application or something like that, is it really critical for them to know coding, to learn to know how to do some front end design?
It depends.
Okay.
I think so. Not at a level. As you get more senior, I think yes, because that creates more leverage, right? When you think about why do I get this senior role, I start out as maybe an associate product designer, and I have a certain set of responsibilities, and then I get promoted to like regular product designer, and then I get promoted to senior product designer. What does that mean? Like, why would I get those promotions? Is it just because I have better taste than the people I work with? Is it just because I have better soft skills, and I'm able to communicate? Is it this like terrifying realm for a lot of designers where it's like, oh no, you're going down a management track, and that's how you get seniority, and that's the only way to progress.
Right.
And I tend to think of those skills as just creating more and more leverage as a designer. So
Yeah.
if I took a career path of I graduate Flatiron School, what I'm coming out with is a really, really solid foundation around understanding both how user research flows into UX design, which flows into getting into like that screen level kind of interaction UI design, which flows into kind of the prototyping aspect. And so I don't think if you're playing those roles at a junior level, you're getting a lot of work kind of given to you.
Yeah.
You know, you're not coming up with your own work.
Right.
Someone's saying, hey, can you go look at these 3 screens in this application? We have a conversion problem here, or nobody's doing this thing, or we've built this feature and nobody seems to be interacting with it. And these are our hypotheses as to why. Here's the rough thing we'd like to kind of see done there. And so then you're basically helping to show what we intend to make, which is my favorite definition of design by far. It's a fourth grader's version of Don Norman's quote, which is design is the rendering of intent. Basically, that just means it's a just designer's job is just to show what the heck we think we should make.
Right.
And so when you're super junior, you're showing what they think we should make, or my boss thinks we should make, and you're helping us see that.
Right.
As you get more senior, you're able to sort of suggest what you think we should make. And when we're talking about digital products, the better handle you have on front-end technology, for example, what that means is it increases your vocabulary. There's this quote maybe from the Dalai Lama or something. I heard it from Brene Brown, not personally, on her podcast. Brene.
Yeah.
The
Goat.
bless Brene.
Yeah.
But she was like, the limits of your language are the limits of your universe. And that made so much sense to me, because what we're talking about here is, if not the ability to dig in and be productive in code, at least the ability to inspect and be conversant. Because then what you have is you can name that thing. Here's a really good example. I interviewed a designer once, and this is back when I was doing design exercises. I don't do those anymore, but we did a design exercise. She created this amazing sort of prototype. It was awesome. She made this prototype, came up with a whole product on her own. And then we were talking through some of the UI, and she had designed this sort of, you had to pick one. It was a list of things, and it was in a form, and you could just pick one. And then you hit submit. And she designed it with checkboxes, and then had some UI like copy around it that said just select one. And if you tried to select another, there'd be like an error state. But all she needed to know was that a radio button is a thing. All you need to know is that there's the radio button. That's the name for when it's a little circle, not a check.
Oh, okay.
And so when that means it's a binary choice, you can only pick, that's a baked in thing to HTML.
Right.
And so she'd done a ton of work, right? Like trying to craft the user experience, because of course she's seen a radio button before.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's a 20-something-year-old woman working in tech. She has seen a radio button, but she just didn't have the vocabulary.
Right.
And so the radio button did not exist in her mindset as a solution, because she just didn't have that word.
Wow.
As you get deeper into tech, and you talk with engineers, you learn the words for these things. A really good example is when you're working at, it's good. It's another example when you're working at more of like a UX level and not a UI level. Let's say we're not doing the UI design here. We're just getting into like, what should the pages be? And we're trying to decide on some information architecture for this application, or just this screen, which information architecture is just information hierarchy. Essentially, it is how are we organizing the content to help you move through this application sensibly. I was working on a Rails app with some people, and so because I've developed Rails applications before, I know like the words for what those things are. I know the difference between a show page and an index page, and what some of the fundamental like kind of scaffolding language is in that framework.
Yeah.
And so when I write my project pitch, or when I'm kind of trying to talk about my solution idea, I can say simple things that immediately translate to an engineer as like a ticket, right? Like I could say, here, basically, we're working on a new student roster right now. So I'm calling the student roster in Rails terms, just the index. It is the index of all of your students. And when you click on a student, you go to their show page. That's like a Rails thing. So engineer knows immediately, oh, cool, I'm getting sort of in my mind a decent picture of how on the back end this kind of fits together.
Yeah.
And what it does for you as a designer is you also sort of get a sense of um, what things are baked in to different frameworks, which helps you understand level of effort around your own designs.
Mm.
Similarly, like on the UI side, Drew, being a super duper capable front end engineer, our staff designer, he's designed our whole design system in Figma using auto layout, so it completely mimics Flexbox. So that when he gives designs to engineers to finish out, or he doesn't have time to code it himself, they understand exactly how it should, you know,
Yeah.
flip for mobile, how exactly this thing works if that content's not there, how things grow and snap depending on variable bits of information. Brand new designers out of a boot camp are probably not going to do
Yeah.
that, depending on the boot camp,
Right.
right? Like if it's a front end UI, totally, that's actually all you'll be able to do probably.
Right.
But it's a piece of leverage. And so as you grow in your design career, or as I have at least,
Yeah.
I've just focused on areas of leverage that are interesting to me and just gotten better and better at those things. And then the things that I know I just need to not lose sight of, I like dip back into once or twice a year.
Right.
So I don't do a ton of coding anymore. I like it. I think it's interesting, but I'm so slow at it. And there's so many people here that are so much better at it than I am. I just stay out of the weeds and instead try and stay pretty abstract with the way I talk about those things.
That's interesting, because then for some people it's not, it won't necessarily if people wanted to not learn code, if they're like, I'm not interested in it, but I just want to know enough to be able to communicate with the stakeholders that I need to communicate with, then they can probably get by with just some surface level knowledge. Kind of like when people sometimes I'll talk to students about like data science, and I'll say, like, do you really like math? And they're like, not really, but I know enough statistics to be useful.
Yeah.
And I'm really good in the other areas. I'm much better at like Python, or maybe just like applying some of the algorithms. So I think that's similar. It's a little bit fake it till you make it a little bit, but if you can communicate, and that's such a great quote. Brene Brown is a whole legend out here, but yeah, that's a great quote. I wanted to ask you also, similarly in the same vein as like picking up stuff as you go, as I did my research on you, and by research I really mean LinkedIn and your website, I noticed a couple of things. So the first thing is that you started out as a graphic designer, and I'm wondering from your perspective, the work that you do as a product designer, how is being a graphic designer similar to being a product designer, and in what ways are they different?
I think that what makes if we're talking about things like some of the obvious normal things that come to mind when we talk about product design, so web screens, mobile apps, things that people interface with, I struggled for a long time with this, honestly, and I've actually come to an opinion about it. So I'm very happy you asked this question.
Let's hear it.
I struggled with it for a really long time because I always felt like for engineers, a lot of what makes them good is kind of objective. Like their work objectively works or it doesn't, to a degree. I know that's a can of worms, but it is often approached, or at least engaged with, as a much more objective thing than design work often is.
Yep.
Right? Like design work often is sort of like, it actually has like a bad rap for being all about like personal taste and people making, web projects, art projects. And I've been accused of that before and that type of thing. And so I think that what makes great designers really, really great at the end of the day is their taste. I think that's why you get into it. I think you get into it because you have good taste. Or you at least have better taste than the people around you, or you at least think you have amazing taste. It is a thing you value about yourself and enjoy leaning into. And so you kind of get into that work.
Yeah.
And what's really sad actually often is, and just about anywhere I've worked, honestly, until recently, when I have a little bit more control over how we do this stuff, is that first thing a design team does is create a design system, right? Like, so that they can create more work more efficiently, share with engineers, that sort of thing. First thing a marketing design team often does is start working on a style guide, right? So that we understand how to keep this all feeling consistent. And so that when other people in the company want to do things, we don't have to answer a million emails. It's there. They can grab our logos. They know what colors we like to use. Here are our fonts, blah, blah, blah. Well, now we've just removed from the required skill set the thing that makes designers great, which is their own personal taste. And so one thing we try to do here is lean into that a lot. So we're trying to craft a brand identity kind of that builds out of the taste of the people that are on our design team, because we have a pretty diverse design team, and one of the greatest values of our company is diversity. And so let's just showcase that. How you showcase a diverse looking product? You have the people with perspectives from diverse backgrounds to create that design,
right.
And you don't compromise. You lean into their aesthetic, and so a lot of what I do at this point on that front is trying to synthesize. So we do a ton of collaboration. One designer might work on something, and another designer might work on something totally different, and then we'll get together and have like a little bit of studio time and try and find a way together to merge those things, as opposed to saying, nope, hers is better, so let's just undo yours and make it all consistent, so it's consistent for consistency's sake, because consistency is always good and people always love consistency. Right. It's just like a wrong assumption. Or consistency is a continuum, right? And so, like, how consistent do you need to be? Should everything be green? So it's just finding the happy medium on that front. I'd kind of grown in my conviction around this because a few years ago, I was at a conference in New York, and I have like an allergy to conferences, because when I was a younger man, even today, I still struggle with it. I have this real like, ooh, I want to be with the cool kids thing. And when I'm like on the outside of that, I just feel kind of lonely and less than. And I went to this conference and I was sort of by myself, and there were a lot of really cool people there, and I was sort of intimidated. There were a lot of people. There were way more people who turned out all to be just as cool that I didn't know. And I just approached it with this idea of like, I'm just going to have a question that I walk around asking every single engineer I know. And that question was, hey, I think what makes designers great is taste. What do you think that is for engineers? I had some of the most amazing conversations I've ever had based on that one conversation. I got like a few different answers back. One said, I think it's the ability to find a needle in a haystack. Another said, I think it's the ability to hold the whole system in your head. And I talked to someone very recently who I asked that, and he goes, it's the same. It's taste. Which kind of blew my mind, but it makes a lot of sense. I assume there must be a sense of taste to writing code. And so that's actually something I want to dig in more on. But I think I went on a tangent there. What was your original question?
No, I like the tangent you went on, because I want to double tap on something you said, or at least double back to it.
Okay.
The idea of taste being the thing that makes product designers good. What about situations where? So I had the conversation with Huli, who's on our enterprise team for design, and one of the conversations that came up was the situation where product designer has a client has something that they're trying to solve, a problem they're trying to solve. They want you to come in and design this product or help build a strategy to get them to the desired outcome through design. And are you comfortable working in a situation where you kind of have this like hallway closet of what you can and cannot do as a designer because of the maybe financial restrictions, maybe like they already have like established guidelines, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you manage having your own taste when certain times when you get into situations with clients, you're kind of restricted to what they want. How do you balance those two?
Sure. Yeah. So let's separate out a couple of ideas here.
Okay.
So on the one hand, we have production work, right? Like we have when you talk about having clients, and I'm making the things to deliver,
Mm-hmm.
that then they are going to implement. Um, and then outside of that, we all kind of on the other side, you have like in-house. Maybe I'm an in-house designer somewhere, and there's a very rigid style guide that I'm working within.
Right.
Maybe it's the opposite, and you're working for a brand new startup, or you're starting your own thing, and you've got nothing. And so you got to pick something
Yeah.
you just need some rails to move along. And so you got to create some rules for yourself. Or maybe you need to bring on some help and you need to create some rules for them. And so how do you encourage them in that? Taste is not just like a visual thing. I haven't looked up a definition for it, I guess, even though I've thought about it a lot. But I kind of like when I say taste, I think what I mean is like this sort of innate sense of what people like.
Mm.
It's this ability. If you might have strong visual taste, like visual graphic design taste, and you can just get it. You might not have a sense for usability. You might not have, or you might not have grown in that knowledge yet. That's probably more accurate. You might not have, you might not be a writer, right? Like you might have no sense of like, you're going to drop disgusting lorem ipsum in every design and not even think about the content, which is such a terrible idea. I hate lorem ipsum with the passion of 1,000 suns, Jelani. It's the worst. That's a topic for another time. Anyway. But so your job,
Right.
let's take that base definition, is to render intent. It's to show what we're trying to make.
Right.
So you're starting with styles in front of you. I think that good designers constantly elevate.
Mm-hmm.
So you learn how to work within those constraints. But one thing I tell our designers all the time is like, I started here and made a little dinky design system just to help my own work. We've just continued to build on that. And my drumbeat is elevate it, elevate it, elevate it, elevate it. Add yours, but build on top. It's like improv. It's yes and.
Yeah.
We're not going to change the topic, but we're going to express ourselves by elevating something here. It isn't an art project, right? Like this is a business, and there are customers buying this product on the other end.
Right.
And so we need to operate within all of those realities and support those different things. Kind of the three kind of Venn diagram of like feasibility, desirability, and viability.
Right.
Like, is this something worth working on? Is it viable? Is there business sense in this? Do we have research that points to people would like it? People need it,
Yeah,
or have an appetite for this kind of thing in their life. The desirability is the way we're doing it, the way people would want to use it. Does it look nice? Is it attractive? Is it easy to use? Does it give you a little dopamine hit every time you use it? All of that kind of stuff. And then feasibility. Can we actually get it done?
Right.
Product designers can elevate within all of those constraints.
Right.
And I think like that's where we're seeing our design system grow and grow and grow right now as we add new components and things. We're just elevating every time. There's also an answer to that. So that's the context, which I don't even know if that was an answer, but that's sort of like the environment, how I think about a designer's job, right?
Yeah.
The other side of that coin is, when you're a new designer, any designer, when you're an old fart designer like me, there is an element of there's an element of curiosity that is so important and life-giving, honestly, and kind of changes the way you look at a lot of your work if you tend to approach your work or requests from a point of criticality, which is, I understand why this might not work, or why this design idea is bad, or I have, researched or informed opinions about that color's terrible, or this, that, and the other thing. And so if you're a critical designer, you kind of approach that with criticism, and so you try and show back something that you think is better, and you're now fighting kind of with that original idea. If you are a curious designer, you see that dissonance and you ask why. You ask, like, you know what I mean? Interesting. I wouldn't have guessed we would have done something like that. How'd you get there? And just let people talk at you and keep pushing in. Good designers don't give you an answer right then. You take that information, you go back, you make time for yourself to think about it, and then you show something.
Yeah.
That might be exactly what they asked for. Either because you just know this person needs exactly what they asked for, or you're going to get fired. That's a situation a lot of designers find themselves in.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, the best thing to do in that scenario is show exactly what they asked for, and then show what you would do instead. Or show what you might suggest as being different. And pictures are perfect for that. A way I do that often is just with a fat marker sketch. I'll design out what was asked for, and then I'll just, in red marker on my iPad, circle an area that doesn't make sense to me, jot a little note as to why I think so, and just point to a couple of examples out on the internet or out on Dribbble of better solutions to this kind of thing. That's designing. I'm showing what I think we should make. I didn't do a thing in Figma. I did not do a UX flow. I did not open Adobe anything. I just gave you a picture, circled what I thought was wrong, and showed what I thought was better as like a really quick way to invite someone who is not a designer into my process so that they can show me things. A lot of times I'll get wireframes from C-level folks or VPs, and they like made them in Excel, and they're insanely apologetic about it because it looks like garbage. And I'm just like, this is so much more informative to me than a Word doc or a Google Doc with bulleted lists of what you think should be included. You are showing me what you're seeing in your head, and now we have a shorthand.
Right.
I can say, no, I'm talking about the header up there, that part that was yellow.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Or we're on Zoom or in the office and pointing at something that will stick in your brain. Paragraphs do not stick in most people's brains the same way images do. I had a designer engineer that I worked under for a long time that would always say, the one who brings pictures wins. And I haven't always found that to be true. But I have found that the one who brings pictures is at least credible.
Yeah.
And that's a thing that designers struggle with a lot is gaining credibility because their work is seen as very subjective.
You mentioned having an edited version of sort of what the initial design was. I think that's super helpful because when, like if somebody's like offering you, or like if you see a shirt or something that you really like, and somebody's like, great, I also have this alternative, and you put them side by side, all of a sudden that once you see the disconnect between like, wait, this, I see what you're saying now. This is doing something counter to what I actually want to have. Because I think the great thing about design is that once you come in, there's an agreed upon final goal. You agree on the exact goal, and now you're just designing the pathway to it. Because like McDonald's ultimate goal is to get you to eat their food. The design of the driveway and that experience is where the design comes in, right?
Yeah. Totally. That's such a good point. Yeah. And that's a great illustration, because let's take that McDonald's drive-through as just like a metaphor here. So where, you're on the one hand, there is the designing the experience for how drive-throughs work for McDonald's in general. I would call that product design to a large degree. It's probably service design and experience design on a lot of things. Well, just for the sake of this conversation, let's call it product design. So the drive-through is my product offering, right? Like I am the product owner of drive-throughs for McDonald's. So within that, like there are a lot of challenges that can come up with drive-throughs. Some of them are larger. How do we get people to the McDonald's with the drive-throughs that are new and have the new fancy thing or whatever? And how do we help them understand that that's available to them? How do we, help them, there's this discoverability element. Once you're there, we can think about the drive-through itself as a funnel, as like a conversion funnel. So I start the drive-through, I get in line, I have not paid any money. McDonald's wants me to pay as much money as I can by the time I come out. I'm just making a base assumption. Maybe that's not their goal there,
Right.
but for the sake of simplicity. Okay. We see that on average, customers at, between breakfast hour and lunch hour on like the downtimes are spending 50% less in general. And we want to try and increase that to drop that to 25% less or
Right.
something. We want to cut that drop in half. We know based on research and blibbity blobbity that people really need like a breakfast milkshake.
Yep.
So we're gonna make a breakfast milkshake, and that should help drive-throughs. Well, I'm over the drive-through. I'm not over milkshakes, but I know that this milkshake is a big goal to help people get through, and there's no dedicated milkshake messaging or
Right.
milkshake idea in our drive-throughs right now, and we're anchoring on this. So how can I improve my drive-through to get X percentage more people to buy these milkshakes?
Yep.
And so now we're in sort of like funnel conversion, and I
Yeah.
don't really know how well a drive-through translates to like a web funnel or an application funnel, because you have a lot of off ramps, and often once you're in a drive-through, like you better order something or you're just going to have to tell them never mind. But if we're talking about the menu, maybe that is okay. We got people to buy milkshakes, and now we want to drop that up, so we remove that drop in percentage between breakfast and lunch completely, and we can do that if they get a milkshake and a toy. I don't know, I'm just making stuff up, but like, okay, cool, so let's optimize. And now you're getting into user experience design and UI design. How do we design that menu so that the milkshake really stands out? Oh, maybe if we have these new digital menus, we can take over the real estate in this top corner that has this ad for breakfast sandwiches. They're still serving them, but it's going down. Everybody always asks if we have breakfast. They want breakfast. We don't necessarily have to signal that we do have it. They're going to ask. Let's signal the milkshake so that they'll buy that instead. So like that's just a very crude sort of example of how those things all kind of work together and group down. And it's not hard to imagine if you're working in a smaller company or a really small company. As a designer, as a product designer, you're going to touch all that. Absolutely. You're going to be involved in all that, and it can be super fun, and it can be extremely overwhelming and daunting as well. It's sort of it really depends on your own attitude, honestly, and how you treat yourself. But
I agree 100%. One of the things I'm really interested in is some of the skills that product designers need. And I think I actually mentioned this before in another episode of a podcast, where I said that empathy is the most important thing that you need as a product designer. And I didn't know where I got that from, but listening to you, I think it was you and I having a conversation, and I heard it from you that empathy is the most important thing. And I'm curious, what are the most, in your opinion, the most overlooked / like undervalued skills that are part of the design process? Like, what parts of the design process are often overlooked and undervalued that we should be paying much more attention to as designers?
Okay. As designers.
I'm coming through with the heavy questions.
Copywriting. Copywriting. That's my main one. I think that and it sort of depends on what you're working on, but it might be UI copy, it might be sort of like application level copy, which I would like. UI copy would be like labels on buttons, little like when I do the form, what's the error message say, that kind of stuff. Application copy, I'm thinking more like when we've got little like a little customer service thing that comes out and asks a question, or people that are able to kind of imagine how we might phrase that and ask that and that sort of thing. And the reason I say that is because I actually really think that the most underlooked ability in any role at all, I don't care what your job is on this planet. I don't care if you're a garbage man. I think that if you can write, it means you can think, or you can show that you think. Like, a lot of people are good thinkers, but that doesn't matter because they can't demonstrate it because they are not good writers. And so it doesn't come across, and then I can't read your mind the way you want me to read your mind.
Right.
I think that designers who hone the ability to, I feel like the best designers I've worked with in my career overall have also been incredible writers. One of the designers I look up to the most, this dude, Jared Christensen, I worked with him at a couple of different jobs. That dude could write an email, man. Holy cow. Some of the emails he sent to clients just diffused situation. He's a real introvert too. He's a super quiet guy in person, really loud online. But his emails were, it was like, the Mark Twain, I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have enough time. He would pare these things down to, he's a huge fan of brevity, and he'd get this email about the design explaining what was going on and why he made trade-offs in such a nice, calm, consumable, and memorable way that kind of made you smile. And he's talking about his own work. And so you can tell, like, you immediately understand this person is really thoughtful about their work in a way that me on the receiving end of this email or this presentation or this conversation or whatever it is, I am not able to articulate what we are doing with this level of clarity. So now they're the most believable person in the room to me when it comes to design things.
Wow.
There are different personalities that are willing to admit that. Sometimes egos come into the mix and they see a designer that can write, and now they just really want to control them. But that's neither here nor there. I think, like, the ability to write in any job automatically means that you are able to help other people read your mind in whatever way you would like them to. And so when it comes to design, I feel like I've gotten tons of efficiency in my job when I've been able to, I'm doing it right now for our marketing website. I'm designing some enterprise pages for our, like, massively growing enterprise program.
Yeah.
And there's content that I got in wireframes, but it's first draft stuff. It's paragraphs and paragraphs of stuff. And I'm like, nobody's going to land on this page and want to start by reading 4 paragraphs of why we're great. Just one line is enough. Just the one most important line. But that's hard to get to. I happen to love writing, and I do it a lot anyway. And so I pare it down. I studied, like, I was like a marketer advertiser in college. That was my track. And so copywriting was my first love, honestly. And I kind of fell into design through that.
With that being said, what questions do you think people should be asking themselves when considering a career in product design? Because, as you said, you fell into it. So you fell into it from marketing, from design. You were doing marketing, advertisement, and then copywriting and graphic design. And then the combination of those things got you to product design. Is there, for people that are considering a career in product design, what questions should they be asking themselves to make sure, like, this is a good fit, this career path?
I like the exercise of, what do I have to believe this is a good idea? And so if I'm thinking about a career in product design, I think that there are a handful of inciting events that might be pushing me towards that. It might be that I'm in a role right now where I'm doing a related job, and I find that that's really interesting to me. I was talking to one of our career coaches the other day. He actually developed a Chrome extension. He used to be a software engineer, and he developed a Chrome extension for our students going through the career services part so that they can get, like, contextual job opportunities when they're on, like, a website that they're interested in that company and they have job postings.
That's cool.
Pretty rad. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
And so he and I talked, and he's kind of like, are there openings on your team? I'm like, let's keep collabing. Yeah, I'd love to find a way to kind of, like, crossover. So for him, he has some related experience and is thinking about it. Someone else might be in a spot where they're just totally something unrelated. But this looks fun to them maybe, or it looks lucrative to them maybe, or it looks like a thing that is for some reason wherever they're at the next level up in their career. And so if I want to get to the next stage, I believe like I need to be able to like show my thoughts rather than just like say my thoughts or type my thoughts or code my thoughts or whatever. I might be hoping, so like not inciting events, but sort of like hopes down the road. I might be looking at like, what do I imagine my life will be like as a designer?
Yeah.
You know? And so for me, when I still think about those things, honestly, because you know, you're always sort of deciding to some, you go through these phases in life where it's like, do I want to keep doing this or do I want to go become a landscaper, which is a thing I think about sometimes.
Yeah.
But you know, you might imagine that like, oh, I'll have this nice big monitor and it'll be tidy and neat, and I'll have like a cool keyboard with colors on it, and you know, like a cool mic, and these are the designers that I've seen, and so you know, that's kind of what I imagine, and I'll have a portfolio and I'll be able to point people to my work and they'll think I'm really cool and that kind of stuff. So now come like the what ifs.
Yeah.
So what do I have to believe to believe that's going to pan out for me?
Yep.
You know, I think I've got like, well, what if I don't make a lot of money at it? What if I'm able to be like a good designer, but it's just not like a lucrative thing enough? So I would look into like, how much does this pay? Does it fit my lifestyle in general? Like I'm a lawyer and I'm thinking about becoming a software engineer or a product designer. You're probably going to take a pay cut, at least for a little bit, you know, maybe forever. It's just a different kind of work. I think that, you know, you might be kind of worried that like, you're not going to be any good at it. Like, what if I start this and gosh, I listened to that podcast and that idiot Matt said something about taste and I actually don't have any taste. What do I do? When I like taste is just knowing, right? Like just having a sense, like, and that gets developed. The way I learned to design interfaces was just copying.
Yeah.
Honestly, like I would just find websites out there and I would try and mock them up exactly that way in Photoshop back then.
Yep.
And so you kind of develop your taste by looking at other people whose work you think is good. And it sort of, over time, you get that. So, you know, one way to combat that might be like, oh, I'm going to try a daily UI exercise for 100 days with this free Figma thing and just see if I like trying to make stuff look good. Because that's a big part of your everyday job is trying to make things aesthetically pleasing, honestly, depending on where you're at in that design continuum, right? Like you could be a product designer that never touches UI. Let's be clear. Like you could be a very, very good, great, amazing product designer that never works in UI. I think you'd have to know a lot about UI and be deeply conversant in UI in order to be that great. But like, you don't have to be good at doing it. I think you have to know. Pete Barth is a great example, our chief product officer. He is not a designer, but has great taste. And so he is able to look at stuff that we ship and be like, I don't know, is that the best we can do? Not a lot of chief product officers are going to be able to do that, right? He just happens to have really good taste. Status quo side, like things that might kind of hold me back from deciding, I don't know, it's just kind of like easier to stay where I'm at. Or it's just, you know, like I am used to I'm a marketer and I've worked in Canva and I've used that tool a bunch and I know it, but these other tools look kind of scary. And so I'm sort of nervous about trying out something new. Or gosh, like I am, I have not worked near tech at all. And I know this job works closely with software engineers and that seems like a totally foreign world and it's really frightening. So I'd kind of do just an inventory around those personal forces of progress for yourself. And then just ask like, well, okay, so I think I got to believe that this can pay my bills. First of all, if it's a job I want to switch to, I got to believe that I would enjoy kind of the daily aspects of it. And I think I got to believe that the career path looks like it's going down a direction that is both interesting and life-giving to me, but also doable. Like, do I think, like, can I climb that mountain? Or, you know, is this a straight, you know, am I going up Half Dome here with like a professional rock climber? I don't think I'm ready for that. And so a lot of this is like some of these questions are actually like pretty easy to answer I feel like once you identify them.
Right.
And so I think to answer your question, so I'm like talking out a lot because I hadn't really thought deeply about it before, but
Yeah.
I think that if I were considering a product design career, I would ask myself, like, do I like working visually? If I don't like working with visual tools, or I really don't think I would, this is probably not the career for you, because design is a rendering of intent. We're trying to show what we think we should make. I think that, like, I would ask myself, am I a curious person or am I generally critical? Like, what's my disposition? Like, critical people make amazing attorneys, make amazing VPs, make amazing managers, right? Like, I don't mean critical as like a negative thing. I mean, it is the I have an allergy to being super critical myself, just because of my own like childhood trauma things. But the I think that the being critical is like almost like the operational arm of curiosity.
Yeah.
Maybe is the way I think about it. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm curious, is open, but now we need to move. And so, like, I need to be critical about what we're doing, what we're not doing. Cut this off. I've designed this button enough for today. This is done enough. I'm being critical about my own work, about others' work. I'm able to identify issues that are going on in this design over here, and so I can kind of suggest some better things. I think that, like, starting with curiosity there always leads to a better process and probably better design work, and more collaboration overall. But at some point you got to get critical.
Yeah.
And so I think just understanding where am I there? How do people receive my criticism in general? Like, how do people receive my questioning? And am I the annoying person that doesn't know, like, asks why a million times, but has no tact? Like, what does that look like? Because a big part of your job is going to be collaborating with people.
Yep.
So do you like to work? Do I like to work with visual tools? Do I like to work with other people? You can be an introvert and really like to work with other people. This is not like an introvert extrovert thing. It is a openness thing.
For sure.
You know, are my projects my babies, or are my projects my work? And so there is a level of, like, my project is my baby that a lot of designers get. That's an art project. If it's your baby, it's not for here. You know, if it's your baby, like, it should be a side hustle thing.
Yeah.
This is collaborative work that we all share. And so you have to approach, maybe this is a difference too between software engineering and design. So when I code things and get review on that code in GitHub, it's very line by line, objective. There's a more efficient way to do this. There's a more efficient way to do that. And engineers are really, really skilled at identifying those and making suggestions, often in a very diplomatic way, because they do it all the time. Designers, not so much, right? It's very subjective often is how it feels. And there is a subjective aspect to it. And so when you share your designs and people critique it, they critique it holistically, and it's very easy to stick your identity into it.
Yeah.
So where then that criticism comes back as a criticism of, like, who you are. Your taste is not good here. I don't just mean the colors and the styling. I mean that the solution that you thought was desirable is not what we want to do. And oftentimes that's coming from business reasons or feasibility reasons or whatever. But there is not expertise, often at a leadership level, to say why it's not working. And so I think that that's the big piece of, like, you have to be willing to work with other people and kind of, like, I don't want to say thick skin, but there is a resilience, I think, that is sort of required to be a designer over the course of, like, many, many years. You know, it's one thing to, like, try it out for a bit. But that's a great test, you know, is like, and I actually think, like, it's honestly like a muscle that just needs to get continually worked on and developed, the ability to receive critique on your visual work that, you know, is different than what you thought you should do. I still have an immediate, like, negative response when the first thing out of someone's mouth is,
I
don't know. It's just like, oh my God. Oh, I'm so bad at this job, because they're not talking about a little thing.
Yeah.
They're talking about the whole thing.
I talked to Huli about that exact thing. And I said, in order to grow as a designer, it sounds like you have to leave your ego at the door. Like you cannot feel really, you can't be emotionally invested into some of these projects, because when you get the critique and you get the feedback, which designers ask for consistently because they want the feedback. And I was telling Huli too, like, sometimes it feels like when someone asks for feedback, and this is not necessarily the case with designers, when people ask for feedback, what they're actually asking for is affirmation in something that they've already done.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. They're looking like, God, I think this is amazing. I also want you to confirm that this is amazing. And if your feedback is, anything less than that, then, there's a chance that if the person is emotionally invested in it, that they can get hurt from it.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Good Lord. You want to talk about bloopers. I wish I could go back over some of the jobs I've had and record some of the stupid things I've said to clients. Or I remember like one of my first, I was like a brand new web designer. It was my first consulting job. And I was on this project, and it was like all this travel, and I was really excited. I felt like such a grown-up, and one of the clients like really pushed back on something I was doing and just wanted to go with what this more senior information architect was doing instead. And I was like, listen, I'm not just a pixel pusher, man. Like I've got ideas. What I realize now is that I was way too tied to the outcome of my work. And I think that's one nuance that I would maybe change. Like, the perspective you shared was like, you can't have a lot of emotion wrapped up in your work. And I think I disagree, at least for me. I think that in order for me to do good work while I'm doing it, I have to really care. There's a lot of emotion. I put some headphones on, I put on like some randomized taiko or whatever. And I just like, I get into this flow state, and that is emotional. There's an element of this that is like a little bit artistic, it is a little bit of a vibe, and that brings emotion. And I think that it's hard to enjoy your work if it's devoid of emotion. I don't want to detach from my day-to-day stuff, and I'm not a robot, but the difference is I'm trying to learn once I send it off, it's not mine anymore. Right. It was mine while I was working on it for today, but the second I share it, whether I ask for feedback or I don't share it and someone just happens upon it because it's part of all of our work, the second we're talking about it, now it is ours. It's no longer mine.
Right.
And I've got to let go of the emotion and try and be clinical, which then sort of opens the door for like curiosity.
Right.
But if I have all the emotion, I'm going to be defensive and jump straight to critical. I'm going to jump straight to, your idea doesn't work because this is or this, so that's why I did this.
Yeah.
As opposed to, well, I heard you, but I totally heard you before, and I tried kind of down this path, but I don't know. I struggled with it. Do you struggle with it? Like, you might not even have the words as to why.
Right.
But you're just sort of saying, like, I struggled to get there. I tried. I didn't quite. I did this instead. That's a much easier place to move forward in a conversation than like, well, I just disagree.
Absolutely.
I just disagree. I'm the designer. This is what I did. Deal with it.
Yeah.
I think that if you remove the emotion from the outcome, but keep it in the work, because then if I get all that feedback in more of a clinical fashion and I have time to sort of absorb it, or I'm having a bit of an emotional reaction and I'm just like, breathe through it, give myself an evening or a couple hours to just absorb it and then get back to the drawing board, then I'm ready to like get into it again.
I agree. I agree. That's a good point about the compartmentalizing your emotional investment in the project, as to like the emotions end once the project is done and it's off to be critiqued, get feedback on, etc. The reason I agree mostly is because, I mean, this podcast is a living, breathing example of a product that I created.
Yes.
And there's a ton of emotional investment when you're talking about iterating over time. You're talking about booking guests. You're talking about researching guests and stuff like that. So, you know what? I agree with your premise there, and you're right. Compartmentalizing that emotion is super critical. As we wane down here, the question that I'm going to ask you is the question I ask everybody that comes on the show. It's a rite of passage, and it's one of my favorite questions because there's so many great answers, and I'm probably going to make a compilation of the answers at some point because the answers are always really great.
Oh, okay.
For you, Matt Donovan, the myth, the man, the legend, what is a quote that you personally live by?
Oh, I know what it is. I'm going to have to look it up very briefly. It's the first one that came to mind. It's long, and it's by a science fiction writer, and I'm not a huge science fiction writer. Yeah. Give me just a second here.
Yes, look it up.
What's his name? Okay. So this is a quote by Robert Heinlein, who is a science fiction author from like the 50s, 60s, that era. And he has this book called Time Enough for Love, which is essentially about this, I don't really know what it's about, but the main character is this guy that's like hundreds and hundreds of years old, basically. And so the quote is, a human being should be able to change a diaper, plan an invasion, butcher a hog, con a ship, design a building, write a sonnet, balance accounts, build a wall, set a bone, comfort the dying, take orders, give orders, cooperate, act alone, solve equations, analyze a new problem, pitch manure, program a computer, cook a tasty meal, fight efficiently, die gallantly. Specialization is for insects. I think that is a quote that I live by, or at least that idea. Like I come back to that a lot. I'm a huge fan of personal agency. I think that, and as that applies to, I mean, you could probably see that throughout our conversation here. I'm often thinking of like in a design role, okay, I should also be a good writer so I can communicate my ideas. Helpful to know some software engineering so I understand the things. And over time, when you build those skills, you just build more and more leverage for yourself. But that has to come from an attitude sort of encapsulated in that quote, which is, I am a whole human. I would like and can be and maybe should be good and capable at a lot of different things. A lot of different things. And so that's one that I really love.
I love it. That's really dope. And I understand why you wouldn't be able to memorize that, because that is a lot of different
I should. It'd be impressive. Yeah, no, it's really I should impressive. Memorize it because I could really put some gusto in it and it would preach. I think I could really, if I memorized it and learned it, I think I could have delivered it to you. You would have wet your pants. I could have really just drove into your soul there, I think.
Oh yeah. Maybe but no, I get the perspective. I love it. That's a really, really, really interesting quote. Matty Don, thank you for being on the pod. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Man. Let the people know, like, if they want to get in contact with you, your website, LinkedIn. Yeah, let us know where we can reach out.
Yeah. MattDonovan.me is my outdated website. That's probably the best place. Twitter, Matt Donovan, Instagram, Matt Donovan, all the things. I pretty much Matt Donovan on all the stuff. Nice. But yeah, I'd say go to my website, and that gives you enough links to kind of reach out and get in touch.
Cool. I'm your host.
I'd love to talk.
Yeah. I have been your host, Jelani. If you made it this far, please subscribe, like, put the notification button on, save it, send it to your friends, throw it in the group chat, tell your mom, talk to your dog about it, please. And with that, we are out.